Good afternoon and welcome to this session on IVF. We have with us a specialist who's going to answer all our questions. Please welcome Dr. Rishi.
Hello, hi.
He's a renowned IVF specialist and also the director of Fortis Bloom IVF Center. And of course, there is a whole lot of questions lined up for us. There's many of them, of course, and they're going to keep pouring in. But I'd like to start with a broad explanation of IVF so that all our viewers know what we are talking about exactly.
So, thank you for calling me on this show, first of all. And primarily, if there's a couple who has married for 1 year and they still don't conceive, then we call them as an infertile couple. And initially, we try and investigate. We do a semen test for the husband to find out if there's a problem in the male. And if the count is low or the motility is low, we know that there's a problem in the male. If there is no problem in the male, then we also look for any problems in the woman. So we would do generally blood tests. We look at hormones. Nowadays we do a very popular test called anti-Mullerian hormone called AMH, which gives us a good idea of the reserve. A normal AMH is more than 2.5. So if you have a lesser AMH, we know that the reserve is poor. Or if the AMH is more than 4, then we know that patient has a lot of eggs and she may be a polycystic ovarian disease. We do an ultrasound also. We do TSH hormone examination, the prolactin level, and after that we do a X-ray of the womb, that's called a hysterosalpingogram. And with all that, we come to know whether there is a general problem in the woman or not. If there is a problem, ultrasound shows something like a fibroid or a swollen tube, which is called hydrosalpinx, or a swollen uterus, which is called adenomyosis, or a PCO pattern. Then in those patients, what we do is that we would do a laparoscopy, put a scope in the tummy. We give anesthesia and put a scope in the tummy and find out whether there is any problem in the woman by looking at the uterus from the inside. And we also put a scope in the cavity, that's called a hysteroscope. And after that, we normally tell them to have planned relations and time intercourse. Many people become pregnant with that. If that fails, then we give them some medicine to create more than one egg. And when the egg is ready, we inseminate the woman with the husband sample. That's called intrauterine insemination. And normally we subject them to 3-4 IUIs, and many of them become pregnant in that as well. But 20% of women, after doing simple tests and doing simple treatment like intrauterine insemination, they still don't achieve pregnancy. For those women, we do IVF, which is called in vitro fertilization, or popularly also known as test tube baby. So IVF is not for everyone. Any couple who comes to me, simple test with simple monitoring, time intercourse, and if that fails with IUI, majority of people achieve pregnancy. So there's a misconception in people that we should go directly for IVF. You should not.
Right. That was exactly what my next question was going to be, that the tests that you mentioned are all before you start any kind of procedure.
Right.
So what would you say is an ideal candidate for IVF?
Right. So if everything is normal, or if the tubes are blocked, then naturally you can't conceive naturally. So, or if the 3-4 IUIs fail to achieve pregnancy, or there are a lot of people, everything is normal and they are 5 years married and they still don't conceive. It's called unexplained infertility. Or if there is a very bad semen count or motility, or then in those patients you need two types of treatment are there. Either you need an IVF treatment or you need a ICSI treatment. So in IVF, what do we do in IVF? We give the woman a lot of injections, and nowadays they are very, you can take the injections under the skin. They're totally painless and easy to administer. In fact, a lot of patients can take them on their own as well. And once the eggs are ready, we give her anesthesia, and with a small needle, by using the ultrasound, we just take the eggs out. It takes just 10 minutes time. In 4 hours time, after the anesthesia wears out, you can go home. Then we will take the husband's sperm and we will fertilize the eggs in the incubator. And after 2 to 3 days or 5 days, when the embryos are formed, we put them back into the womb with a small plastic catheter. It's a very simple procedure, and that's it. And then we take God's name or whatever. And many, the pregnancy rate is normally 30 to 40%. So if 10 people undergo IVF every time, 3 or 4 of them will achieve a live birth. Many people, the pregnancy rate may be higher, they may conceive, but not all of them go to term. So that's why the live birth rate is what is relevant.
So when you're talking about success rate,
The live birth rate is the most important. What's the use of becoming pregnant but not having a live birth in your hand? So the worldwide live birth rate, if you look at the live birth rate in England, for example, it is 28 to 34%. Or it's in United States. And again, age is also a very important parameter. As the age advances, the live birth rate goes down. So in women less than 37 years of age, the live birth rate is around 40-45%. After that, the live birth rate starts falling down, and in women more than 42, the live birth rate is just 5%. So you must you must get married. Of course, I can't tell you you're all enhanced women, but you must get married early if possible, or even if you get married late, then don't plan too much.
Right. So in your 30s, is that the ideal age?
Yeah, I think 30 is the right age to get married, but it's very impractical.
Then of course, in terms of say an IVF
Yeah.
treatment, so that
35 less than 37 is the success rates are similar. After 37, the rates really start falling.
Right.
But I would say 35. So what happens is, this is where the concept of egg freezing comes in. So a lot of women are there who they don't want to compromise in their life. They want to have a career and they want to postpone marriage. So they can freeze their eggs before the age of 35. So that when suppose they get married at 40, then if they use the eggs that they froze at 35, the pregnancy rate will be 40%. But if they use the eggs of 40, when they are 40, the pregnancy rate will be 10%. So if you preserve your fertility right before 35, and then maybe you wait for the right person, the right guy, you wait for your career to stabilize, whatever various reasons are there.
reasons, of course.
But then you have the option of achieving a pregnancy with your own egg.
So now you mentioned about freezing eggs. What about a frozen embryo? There is a concept of a frozen embryo versus a fresh embryo.
Yeah,
also?
right. So the frozen embryo concept is that if you are a married couple and if you do IVF and you transfer the embryos in the same cycle, you take the eggs out, make the embryos and transfer them in the same cycle, your chances of pregnancy are 40%. But if you freeze them and transfer them in the subsequent cycle, your pregnancy rate goes up by 20%. But there is a corollary to it, provided the embryos are good quality embryos. If the embryos are not that great quality, if you try to freeze them, they will perish in the freezing process. So it's better to transfer them in the fresh cycle. But if the embryos are great quality, then it is better to freeze them and transfer them in the next cycle. In fact, there are a lot of IVF centers in United States nowadays where they only have a freeze all policy. I mean, they'll only freeze and transfer in the next cycle to get better pregnancy rates.
So you mentioned that of course the first step is to go through a series of tests which your doctor will advise you, and once you're clear and you're a candidate for the IVF procedure, what kind of lifestyle would you suggest for these mums to be prospective?
No, everything, unfortunately, everything, the good lifestyle is it's always a boring and humdrum thing to do. You have to eat if you have to eat healthy food, it's never tasty. You know how it is. So, but if your lifestyle means you have to have a healthy living, you have to exercise, you have to see that your BMI, body mass index, is less than 29. Ideally less than 25, but forget it, it's not going to happen. So 25 to 29 would be a okay range of a body mass index, which you can easily calculate.
Things which we would tell any expectant mother.
Yeah, and good, less glycemic index food should be had. Not to eat fried food, not to smoke, not to drink alcohol, exercise.
Right.
Okay, so all those things that you would do and which will help you to live longer, you have to do to get better chances with IVF. In fact, if you reduce your weight by 10%, the IVF success rate goes up by 10%. So obesity is a big player, not only for IVF but for everything in life.
Everything in life, of course. But in this particular context, that is one of the key indicators. A question has already started coming in. Neha Mishra wants to know, are there any risks of an IVF treatment?
Not really. See, there are risks for everything in life. You cross the road today, you may get an accident or you may get blown up by a terrorist bomb. Who knows? So it's the risk is there in everything, but the risks in IVF are very less. You may have surgical risks when you do a pickup. Sometimes once in a blue moon, there may be bleeding or there may be some anesthetic complication, but those are handleable complications nowadays. So I don't think there's major risk. Yes, the long-term risk is that slight 1 in 1,000 chance of ovarian cancer risk goes up a little bit, or there is a risk in terms of multiple pregnancies because you put two embryos in, so sometimes there are twins, etc., etc. But those are acceptable risks.
So this multiple pregnancy is not a given with IVF.
No, not at all.
That is one of the
So,
misconceptions.
so if suppose we transfer 3 embryos back in every woman, let's say there are 100 women who become pregnant, and I transfer 3 embryos back in each of those 100 women. Out of those 100 pregnant women, only 30% will have twins. The remaining 70% will still have single babies, even though we transfer 3 embryos back.
So that's again,
and
basically you're covering
right.
all chances.
And you can also do what is known as single embryo transfer. So you can, because of the freezing technology, you can freeze your embryos, and every time you can transfer one back. I remember I had a Japanese patient many years back, 7-8 years back. She had 7 embryos. She said, "Doctor, I want only one transfer every time. Even though my pregnancy rate will go down, I don't care. I don't want a multiple pregnancy." So I did the 7. I froze those 7 in 7 different stalls, and after first transfer, she became pregnant. I still got her other embryos remaining. So it's up to you. But definitely, if you transfer only one embryo, your pregnancy rate is 30%. If you transfer 2 embryos, your pregnancy rate will go to 40%. If you transfer 3 embryos, you may not get an increase in the rate. But normally we transfer 3 because unlike in the West, in like say in Europe and all, we do out-of-pocket expenditure. See, most of the patients are spending money from their pocket. So in European countries, the money is spent by the government. So they don't mind having one transfer every time. But in our country, because the patients are under pressure to achieve pregnancy, they prefer 2 or 3 embryos.
The delivery. Does the IVF process impact the delivery of the baby in any way?
If you go to the West, in majority, many of the IVF centers, after the IVF conceived babies are there, you can deliver normally. So if suppose you need a cesarean section, as per your normal delivery, if there is an indication you need. But in our country and in many other countries, IVF babies are considered precious. So suppose you are a patient, you conceive and you are now about to deliver, then we give them the option that would you like normal or a cesarean, and then they prefer cesarean. So it is out of choice cesarean delivery. But if you go for a normal, there is no problem. But like the patients are very apprehensive, they have conceived after many years, it's a precious child. Okay, so they want all the people to be around them, the pediatrician, they want to not take a chance of going into a spontaneous delivery in the middle of the night, something goes wrong. So they are very hyper in that mind, and they prefer, but if you look at many of the foreign countries like US and all, they are given the same treatment as a normally conceived person.
Okay, the next question is all about what it involves for the mother after the IVF procedure. Does that mean complete bed rest? Does that mean taking off from work, sitting at home?
Totally wrong. Look at India now. You have 1.3 billion population.
Right.
Do the people conceive by sleeping at home? It's wrong. You do the transfer in most of the American units or they'll send you out from the table immediately after the transfer. In fact, if you sleep for a long time on the bed, after transfer, the pregnancy rate will fall down. So, but we have a compromise in our group. We transfer and keep the patient for 10 minutes. Like if you go to US and all, they will transfer the embryos and you are out on the table. In our unit, we put and make you sleep for 10 minutes at least and then send you back. And then once you conceive, it's like normal, like any other normal woman. Why should you sleep at home and all?
Right.
It's not going to really impact the outcome of pregnancy.
Okay. So that process, the entire process has no bearings whatsoever on staying home, bed rest or anything. As the pregnancy proceeds, I'm guessing that is another issue the doctors will tell you. Okay. So now my question is about in case there is a failure. In that case, what is a good time to keep before trying again? So
failure is a problem in IVF. And that is why we get patients from all over the world also. I get patients from US, from Africa, from Canada, from UK, failed 3 times, 4 times, 6 times. We have done a patient who has failed 28 times also.
Wow.
So failure is but normally in general population now, with the new advancement of technology, within 4 attempts 90% or within 3 attempts 90% people will achieve pregnancy. Then there are certain 10% people who after 3 attempts of IVF they still don't achieve pregnancy, and then we have to really go out of our way and give them higher level of treatment to help them to achieve pregnancy. These are known as recurrent IVF failure patients. So if you fail with 2 or 3, then you get classified as recurrent IVF failure. And then there are newer technologies which we use in our group, like we have a technology called embryoscope. First of all, of course, we can do ICSI. So what is ICSI? Intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So we can take so in a normal IVF procedure, one egg, you take 1 lakh sperm, fertilize, and you drop the sperms on the egg, and the sperm fertilizes the egg and the embryo is formed. In ICSI, you have a machine called micromanipulator. You pick up the sperm and directly inject it into the egg. And normally it is used for low male factor, means where the count is low or sperm motility is less or sperm abnormality is high. In those patients we do ICSI, but we can do ICSI for routine normal count patients also, or patients who fail with IVF, we can do an ICSI procedure. And nowadays we can magnify the image. Normally ICSI is done at 200 times magnify image. We can do a IMSI procedure, where we magnify the image 6,600 times. So we can pick up better looking sperms and inject them to. Yeah. So and that gives better quality embryos. Then we have this incubator. It's called an embryoscope, which takes the photograph of the embryo every 15 minutes, and you can analyze the development pattern of the embryo and select a very good embryo and then put it back to improve the pregnancy rate. Then we have a laser, so we can cut the cover of the embryo with a laser beam. It is known as assisted laser hatching, and those embryos we can put back. Or we have a blastocyst culture, where we develop the embryo for 5 days. Normally we would do a day 2 or a day 3 transfer, but we do a blastocyst day 5 transfer. And in our unit, we are especially specialized in double transfer. So suppose we put 3 patient who has failed, we'll put 1 embryo on day 3, then culture the remaining embryos to the blastocyst stage, and then put 2 embryos on day 5. So, and then of course the new technologies come, which is known as pre-implantation genetic screening. So many of these embryos that look normal are actually genetically abnormal. So you can actually do a biopsy of the embryos, analyze the embryos, and see which is a normal embryo, and that put that in. So all these things we can use for patients who have repeated IVF failures and increase their pregnancy rate.
I'm quite amazed at the kind of scope that there is now. It's
right.
quite vast. So there is a question which is related. Kanika wants to know what can be done to improve the endometrial lining.
Right. So in certain patients, especially in our country, you have a huge rampant infection of the endometrial lining. It's called tuberculosis of the uterus, and that really damages the endometrium. Also, there are certain group of patients where the endometrium lining doesn't grow. So it's like farming IVF. So when you're putting the embryos in, if the lining is not minimum 9 millimeters, and you put the embryo, the results go down. It's like soil. Now, if you have a thin soil and put a seed in, it's not going to give a good result. The germination is not going to happen. Similarly, if the lining is not that good, the germination will not occur. So what we do, a lot of things now, and one of the things we do is we have a GCSF. There's a chemical called GCSF which we put in the uterine cavity to improve the lining. We also first do a hysteroscopy, which I told you we do right at the beginning, and take a biopsy, rule out tuberculosis. Right. If the tuberculosis is present, we'll give a 7 months treatment and kill the disease, and then go for a transfer. And now we have a new technology which we call PRP. So platelet rich plasma. So the same thing that the plastic surgeon used to derive, and they inject it in the scalp to give better hair quality. Same we use and put it in the uterine cavity, and that creates a very good lining. And that recently we have had our first pregnancies with PRP as well. So all these things, and then worst case scenario, if everything else fails, lining is poor, endometrium is damaged, then of course we can do surrogacy, where we can make the embryo and put it in another womb. Right. Of course, now with the new cabinet as our Indian Parliament, we don't know what exactly will be the new surrogacy laws. Right. And we have to wait for that. But presently we can, for worse patients where the lining is very poor, we can do surrogacy as well.
Okay, so one question again, going back to the failure, is stress an important cause of failure?
Stress is 100% important cause of failure, and that's why the government in its new ART bill, which is coming in for infertile patients, have made it compulsory that they should be counseled by an independent counselor before they enter an IVF cycle. And you will be surprised that many of our patients who conceive after IVF and they have the first child, once they have the first child, then they on their own conceive the second child. Right, yeah. because they are no more stressed.
stressed.
I've had patients where they have started conceiving and they have come back for abortion as well. They have had so many children that they have come back. They said, no, there are too many babies found,
So stress is an important.
Very important.
Yeah. In fact, I think Deepika has exactly the same point. She says, no need to panic for embryo transfer. Keep yourself stress free.
Yeah,
That's
right.
really important. What about a couple with a genetic problem? Is there any help for that?
Right. So that's I was telling about implantation genetic screening. So
Right.
same thing. So if your baby is the couple has in our country the biggest problem is thalassemia.
Right.
And if two thalassemia minors they get married, the child can be thalassemia major, and that's a
Right,
real big
right.
problem.
Sure.
The child has to have transfusions almost every week, and many of the children die also. So one of the ways of doing that is that when they conceive, they can test the child whether it's major or minor. If it is major, they do an abortion
Okay.
and terminate the child. But we can use IVF, we can make the embryo, we can do a biopsy of the embryo, check whether it is a thalassemia major or a minor or thalassemia free, and only put the minor embryos back or the thalassemia free embryos back and discard the major embryo. So that, or another problem which is majorly common is Down's baby.
Right.
So a previous history of Down's child, mentally retarded, you can then do the same pre-implantation genetic it's called PGD. So we have got two techniques. One is a PGD. So if you have previous abnormal child, then you do a PGD. Like you have a thalassemia child or a Down's baby or a muscular dystrophy. And once is you have recurrent IVF failures, and then you want to check whether embryos are normal or not. So that's called PGS, pre-implantation genetic screening. So when we have got pre-implantation genetic diagnosis for diagnosing abnormal babies who have in parents who have previous bad history, and one is PGS where women are failing to achieve pregnancy with repeated failures, where we do a biopsy to see whether the normally looking embryo is actually genetically abnormal.
Like I said, that the advancements are just mind-boggling. There is nothing you
I
can't
know.
do, it seems. Okay. The next question is a little more specific. It's about oocyte freezing. So the question is, please explain, should I go for oocyte freezing now, as my AMH was 10.5 1 year back and now it is 5?
It depends on your age. If you are more than 35, if your AMH is good, that means you have a good result. So you can wait.
Right.
You can wait for the, AMH is a very good parameter. So I tell my patients, you can't call them patients, you can call them, I don't know what to call a person who comes to you for just egg freezing advice, but you can tell that, okay, first do an AMH, see your reserve. If the reserve is good, if AMH is more than 2.5, then you are okay, you can wait for some time. But if you cross 37, your anyway pregnancy rate is going to go down. So if you are not married by 35, you must freeze your eggs. If you don't have, when patients always come to me, I first tell them, please get married. Of course, I am not supposed to tell that. I am a doctor, but I use as because why unnecessarily freeze your eggs? But if you can't for whatever reason, then again, it's I think a MCP kind of statement to tell a person that to get married. So yes, if you come to me, I'll do an AMH test. If it is good reserve, I would suggest you can wait. But if you still cross 35, it's best to preserve your eggs.
So we don't get very many people who accept that it's an MCP type of question. So thank you for that. But we get your point that the whole idea is to plan it well in advance and plan because there is it's a recorded reduction in chance in your success rate. So this is something one should definitely.
It's an insurance,
right? So so the whole idea is, if I don't want to get pregnant right now, how can IVF help? So this is basically your answer to this.
Yeah.
If I want to get pregnant at a later stage,
right?
Exactly what will happen? What is the step by step?
Means I didn't understand.
So if I want to get pregnant at a later stage and not right now.
Right. So in that case, you will come to me. I would give you the injections, create the eggs, take them out, freeze them, store them in liquid nitrogen. Then you, at some point down the line, you may get married. Then at that point, you would still try to have a pregnancy with your own naturally conceived egg. If you fail with that, and if you need to go for IVF, then only I come in the picture. The stored eggs will be thawed, and we can do the micro injection ICSI with your husband's sperm, make the embryos and put them in, and give you a pregnancy. But remember the pregnancy, people have a misconception that if they freeze the eggs, that means okay, now everything is great. I am going to get pregnant as and when I want it. No, you will have the pregnancy chance of 30%. It's not going to be 100% at that point in time. But had you used the eggs that were 40-year-old, your pregnancy chance would have been 10% or 5%. By freezing them at the age of 35, you are giving your body a pregnancy chance of 40%, but not 100%.
And what is the duration that the eggs can be frozen for?
5 years, 10 years.
Okay.
It's, once the eggs are in a carrier and they are in liquid nitrogen, the temperature of liquid nitrogen is minus 196 degrees. That is, the temperature of ice in the freezer is 0 degrees. Your eggs are kept at minus nearly 200 degrees below ice temperature. So at that point in time, all the activity in the eggs, it comes to a standstill. You are the embryos or eggs are in a suspended animation, and in that state, so long as you maintain the liquid nitrogen level, you can maintain the eggs for hundreds of years.
So there is no drop in the
so long, no, 100, because it is at a suspended. You can, like it's the mammoths which are frozen in the ice age, in deep ice, so they are in suspended animation.
Okay. Now the next question is about laparoscopy. Is there any role of laparoscopy before IVF?
Yeah, so in our country, if you go to the United States and you are a patient there, then as I told you, first you will do investigation, do a semen test, rule out the husband factor, you will do an ultrasound, an X-ray, a hormone test, and then they will go, if everything is normal, they will go straight for IUI. They will try 3-4 insemination cycles. If that fails, they will go straight for IVF. But in our country, a big problem. So, but for an ultrasound, you see fibroid, you see a swollen tube called hydrosalpinx, or you see any pathology, or you do an X-ray of the womb and the tubes are blocked. Then there may be a pathology inside your tummy. So in those patients, we need to do a laparoscopy. In our country, additionally, we have genital tuberculosis, which is a big player, which is not there in the United States. So in our country, even though ultrasound is normal, everything is normal, you may still have that disease, and that's why a laparoscopy, I would suggest, I personally traditionally was trained in doing a laparoscopy before I go for IVF, but many patients come to me and say, doctor, I'm scared, I don't want to do a scopy, it's invasive, you have to cut my navel and put the scope in, I don't want to do it. So in those patients, we just do a biopsy of the womb, just rule out the tuberculosis and go straight for IVF. After the simple methods fail, you understand, no?
Yeah, somewhat I'm being able to follow, of course. But yeah, so there is a role for, again, it is optional.
Yeah, so but on an ultrasound, let's say, put it very simply, if on an ultrasound there is a abnormal finding like a fibroid or a cyst or a swollen uterus called adenomyosis or a tube which is swollen, or you have symptoms, you have got painful periods, painful coitus which suggests endometriosis.
Right.
In those, it's definitely indicated to put a scope in.
So in fact, there is a question relating to endometriosis, that can women with endometriosis get pregnant?
Of course, women with endometriosis can get pregnant. If suppose you have endometriosis and you have not considered, let's say for 3 years, then important to do a laparoscopy. Okay. So ultrasound will diagnose the endometriosis, and you do a scopy, you remove the endometriosis, and many people achieve pregnancy after laparoscopy for endometriosis. Right. If after 6 months of laparoscopy you still are not pregnant, then we can go for IVF.
Okay. So now, of course, a very critical question about the cost. That what is the whole process cost?
So a normal, the problem is that it's very, in India it's a battle of cost only, all the time. So like our unit, we are like a high-end unit, but if you look at the costs of IVF, for example, I had a stent 2 years back. One stent that time cost me 1.5 lakh rupees. So in our unit, a whole cost of one IVF cycle is 1.5 lakh. I put 3 stents. My cost was huge. So compared to those costs, these are minor costs, because I always say that in our line also, what are we doing? We are creating life. Just like a cardiologist is saving life, I am creating life. So I should be also charging very high, but I don't charge very high. So it's a reasonable cost. And for patients who are very not that well off, we are giving at lesser cost also. So because I always believe that we have we have all doctors now. We have something called ISR. What is ISR? This is Dr. Pai's terminology. It is called individual social responsibility. We always, so if there is a patient who is poor, I mean, what differentiates a doctor from others? What differentiates me from a lawyer or an architect or an engineer? It is my power which I have of giving treatment free of charge. That power is there. That is, if you use effectively in your life, we are very happy. Because that others can't give.
But on the whole, so is that the kind of range that people should expect?
Yeah, so we would charge 1 lakh plus medicine. Medicine costs are 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 rupees. So 1.5 lakhs is the cost of IVF. But for patients who are not affording, I may even charge 60,000, 70,000 plus medicine. Depending. And sometimes, garib logo to I don't even charge them. I mean, that's what doctors are all about. Now, we are not business people. Remember that. We are professionals. We always care for our patients. And we have been trained for, like, when we were resident doctors, nearly 15 years of our life we spend in teaching hospital. Everything is we do free. So we are mentally tuned to helping people.
Of course. Okay, here's a specific question again. My husband's DNA fragmentation report shows fair to poor. What can be done to improve this?
So
what would that mean
exactly? That I don't know, because normally in our DFI report it is more than 30% or less than. If your DNA fragmentation index is more than 30%, that means the sperm is not that great. So we give antioxidants for 2 months. Antioxidants are all these coenzyme Q, lycopene, various antioxidants are that and that helps them to improve their fragmentation, and after that we do the IVF.
Right. Okay. So I think you got a thumbs up for the individual social responsibility of doctors. It's been appreciated already.
Great.
Okay. So there is, of course, this whole IVF is related with stress, with a lot of emotions and everything. So we had a question about how does one humanize what is essentially an artificial process?
Yeah, so basically now we need to connect a lot with the patients, and that's where that's where we probably fail. There was a study in the United States where they found that after the IVF embryo transfer, the 14 days before you do the pregnancy test are very crucial, and a lot of people, suppose they fail in the first cycle, they don't come for the second cycle. Right. And they did an analysis of this, why, what is the reason? So, and they found that not only because there were certain people who were covered by insurance, so money is a factor. So, first cycle fails, they may not come because the money factor is there. But even those who were covered by insurance, many people didn't come for the second cycle. So, what they found that one of the reasons was that the patient is under tremendous stress of the pregnancy days, whether it will become positive or negative. So, the 14 days of the transfer is very important. That I keep on telling my staff also that we need to connect with the patient, at least phone them once in 4 days and chat with them and cool them down. Right. So that when that crucial day of test comes, suppose if the test still comes negative because they had a positive experience with the staff of the IVF center, they may come for the second cycle. Or many of them have the other reason for dropouts is that they have a physical, like after the IVF they may have pain in the abdomen, they may have constipation, so they have a turbulent period of 14 days. That also contributes to dropout. So if we can take care of their, of course, financial, so what we would do is give them a concession in the second cycle if they fail. If we can take care of their physical problem, pain ho gaya to pain killer diya, and be in constant touch with the patient, then that becomes a good experience for them. So, but it's a challenge because what happens is that in order to really give this kind of thing, you need a lot of staff. Sure. And once you have a lot of staff, then you will have to charge them more money, which is not acceptable. So it's a catch-22 kind of situation. And maybe in the future, what will happen is that this is where artificial intelligence may come in. So we may have robots who will be like humans, who will connect with you and who will take you through without being fatigued at all, because the robot will not fatigue.
So quick question, you mentioned pain in the abdomen and all, are these typical?
Yeah, some many of them may get some little bit of constipation, but most of the time,
There's no
they don't
sign.
have any problem. But we have to. So the connecting with the patient is going to be, nowadays patients are also quite demanding, and we are all human beings, and we have to keep on continuing and improving ourselves. One of the problems which our Indian doctors, I feel, is that we have mastered the technique part of it, but we have to also master the human part of it, which slowly and surely, because all of you are there and you are all the time hammering thumbs up, 3-star, 5-star, this doctor is bad. So we are now on our toes, and slowly and surely we are slowly evolving, and we are changing ourselves, and we are perfecting ourselves, and maybe somewhere down the line we will become as good as our Western counterparts in the human part of it as well.
Right. So Mahima wanted to know, how do you test for chromosomal abnormalities in embryos of couples with advancing age? So doctor has
that
answered
PGS is
already.
there. You technically take the biopsy and do the analysis, and now there is a new technology that is coming. It's called next gen sequencing. So with the next gen sequencing, you can do whole. In fact, in the future, when we perfect the technique of PGS, we may do routine embryo analysis on all embryos, and not only for major chromosome, but also for if you have a gene for breast cancer or the cancer, then we can detect them and we can avoid those embryos. So, but that's a future thing.
So we're running short of time. I'm just going to take these last two questions. Sindhu has a very specific question. She had a cyst in her right ovary, treated and removed last year. Periods were irregular. Now again taking medicine, regularizing. I tried conceiving, but again she had a cyst in her left ovary. So she had a scan on, as soon as recent as 28th April. What may be the reason? What should be my next step?
I think she may be a PCO. Most of the North India, the PCO incidence is, I think, 50%. Every second woman is a PCO.
Again, no need to jump to IVF straight away. They must be.
Yeah, but so you can do IUI 3-4 cycles. If that fails, you can go for IVF. Simple.
Right. Okay, Sonia's question is about grade 4 endometriosis, frozen pelvis with multiple fibroids and endometriosis, underwent lap myomectomy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And endometrioma removal. Attempting IVF this cycle, what are the chances of success?
The chances of success, it depends on a AMH level. If your ovarian reserve is good, you have a good chance. If your ovarian reserve has gone down, chances are lower. But in poor reserve patients, what we do is we do embryo pooling nowadays. Means, many of them may get one embryo, so we freeze these embryos. We accumulate the embryos, and then after 3-4 cycles, then we put the embryos back to give better pregnancy chance. And like after say 3-4 cycles, if they still fail to achieve pregnancy with their own egg, then they can always have the option of borrowing an egg. That is known as egg donation. So you borrow an egg from a donor, and then take the husband's sperm, make the baby and insert it.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pai. It's been a very informative session, and if you do have more questions, please list them down in the comments right here, and we'll have Dr. Pai's team answer them.
Thank you very much, Pavel.